Hi, and welcome to Monotrail Tech Talk. To kick off the year, I thought it would be fun to do a full studio tour. I don't just want to point at gear and tell you what it's called though, so I decided to use this video to share more of my personal story and journey into music as well. If you're interested in how I record the modular, other gear, and keep everything in sync with MIDI, keep an eye out on the channel, because I decided to record a more to-the-point separate video about that, which I'll upload next week. But now, let's dive right in. I think of my studio as an organic growing thing. It's not finished or perfect, partly based on things that I bought many years ago and limited by the space and money I have available today. And that's fine. It's what makes a studio a personal space. As it is today though, I'm really happy about it. As some of you know, I've been making music on the side for a long time, but it's only since last year I decided to pretty much go full out with it. I started this tutorial channel and dedicated a separate room in my house for it. I struggled a lot with my back last year though, so I only just now pretty much have it all set up the way I had it in mind from the start. It is designed to have a productive workflow focused around jamming and making these videos. The setup has a few different sections that I often look at as different projects I can work on. The section in the middle is the most boring one, but still the heart of the studio. It's got my laptop, mostly running Ableton, used for recording, a master clock, and a lot of sequencing as well. I use this place as less as possible, but still sit here when mixing projects and editing videos. The right side is the one you've been able to see grow over the last year, the modular part. I moved this to standing height, which is better for my back, and also feels more active in general when making music. This section can function completely without the laptop, and has its own sections. In the middle, I set up my current performance rig. It's just a modular case, the Yamaha CP, the Arturia Beatstep Pro, and a couple of effects pedals. I can easily patch up my current live patch, as I've done right now, and just use this section to write and practice my live performance. Clock and sequencing is done from the Beatstep Pro, so I don't need my laptop to work with this area. Next to it is a second case. I'm still developing its workflow, but it will mostly be focused on sound design. Although I'm also considering to make it a performable setup as well, so I have some room left in front of it, in case I want to add a controller or drum machine for example. On the far left I have my old Dreadbox case. This case holds a few lovely modules I use a lot in studio productions or when I'm just jamming or making sounds. This is also the place where I experiment with modules for tutorial videos before I film them. The setup on the other side of the studio is pretty new. Of course, I have some plans to develop it over time, but I'm also already excited about it as it is today. It was really nice to bring out some older gear that I own and have everything set up, connected at the same time and ready to go. This section is mostly focused on synths and gear with patch memory, sequenced from Ableton. This rack gives me the possibility to just jam with gear even when I'm in the middle of working on a live patch or tutorial videos with the modular section. I can easily store patches and sequences, leave a song for a while and come back whenever I want. At the core is this little Akai MIDI controller hooked up to Ableton Live. Using a template I made with MIDI routings, I can use it to record, arm any of the synths on the rack. use my main MIDI controller to play it, and quickly record, play, and jam with recorded clips. I expect this section to have a big impact on my productivity this year. Before I go over all the gear I'm using, I want to share that it was really a big step for me going all out with music and this Tech Talk series. If you want to see more modular content from me, consider dropping a like and subscribe, as it helps out the channel a lot. Or if you want to do more and get access to the PDF sheets of the illustrations I use in my regular tutorial videos, have a look at my Patreon. In this part, I'll go over all the synths and musical gear in my studio in chronological order, and share some thoughts about why I bought it and why I still have it. It all starts with the oldest thing I still own and use in my studio, the Roland EP880, a digital piano. I had some guitar lessons when I was a kid, but never really connected with it. But when my parents bought an old but still tunable piano, I immediately fell in love with it. I knew nothing of chords or music theory, but just pressing keys, finding some combinations sound like crap, and others made me cry in a good way, was really lovely. I also am a more visual person, and remembering music and chords played on keys just worked better for me than on a guitar. So I bought it when I started living on my own. I never had any lessons, but I still use it all the time to improvise and come up with melodies and chord progressions. And it's also the main MIDI controller for all my other synths as well. The weighted keys are still really good today, but the sound isn't that great for modern times. I generally use a VST if I want to use the piano sound in my productions. After quite some time playing the piano, I wanted to expand the sound I could make with it, so I started looking for an external sound module. To be clear though, at this time I knew absolutely nothing about synthesis. I tried out some things in the store and decided to buy this thing, the UseAudio Plugiator. In all fairness, I put it here just for this video. It's not connected and I don't really use it anymore. I just struggled to sell it because it was technically my first synth ever. It's basically 6 VSTs in a box, running engines inspired by the Minimoog, Art Odyssey, Prophet 12, as well as some very flexible digital setups. The main reason why I don't use it anymore is because you just have access to the filter and amp envelope from the front. So you can only program it via software, and I'm trying to be away from the laptop as much as possible. At the time, I used it a lot though, and messing around with parameters on the screen even though I didn't know exactly what I was doing was a lot of fun. In fact, so much that I knew I wanted to get a synth that I could use and program as a standalone instrument. So I bought the Korg MicroKorg, a fully digital 4-voice polyphonic synth. It was very popular at the time and actually still in production today. I kind of feel like this was my actual first synth though, as it came with a decent manual explaining all the basics. It has these lovely notes on what a filter does and how to use an envelope, for example. And this was actually the first time I learned about these things properly. More importantly, I could program all of its features on the fly using the parameter matrix. And unlike the sound module, I could play it separately from the piano. I had been playing with friends in a group formation for some time, but buying the MicroKorg led to my first ever solo performance, just using it on top of the Roland. I actually played it so much, I completely wore down the keys. But the sound module section still works fine. From there, I experimented a bit with expanding that simple live setup. I tried using a foot controller to play the Plugiator. I bought a Boss loop station to layer sounds and also got this second-hand Korg ER1 to add some percussion. I kept this one because it's a fun tool and I feel like it's a modern classic, but also don't use it much now as the sound doesn't really fit my taste. None of the experiments at the time though really led to a setup that worked for me. I did really enjoy designing sounds with the MicroKorg though, so I started looking at buying a bigger synth. At the top of my list at the time was the Prophet 8. But when searching online, comparing synths and learning about the history of synthesis, I finally learned about Bob Moog, Don Buchla, modular synthesizers and inevitably came across the Eurorack format. I was drawn to it immediately, feeling that all these shiny LED-covered modules were not only the ultimate sound design solution, but would also give me the possibility to design my own instrument. Instead of building a synth, I could design a portable case that could be used to create multiple synth sounds, as well as generate percussive sounds, play samples, and pretty much do anything I want. Basically, I could build a complete live performance setup in a portable case. That idea was so attractive, it didn't take me long to make the decision to go for it. So I took some money, went to the store, and bought this. The Arturia Microbrute. It's a monophonic, one knob per function, fully analog synth with a pretty distinct character. It's definitely limited in quite some ways. There's only one oscillator and no noise source, for example. But it can do both pretty gentle as well as fat and dirty sounds. There were 4 reasons I got this. I wanted to see if the whole analog versus digital actually made a difference to me. Being used to the piano and MicroKorg, I was curious if I could get used to a monophonic instrument that had no patch memory at all. And finally, if I would enjoy all of that and still go for the modular route, I could expand from it. Pretty much the first day I got it, the answer was pretty clear to me. Compared to the MicroKorg, the analog part made a huge difference to me. And playing monophonic was a fine trade-off in return for the one knob per function joy of sculpting sounds. So I went on with my plan to go modular and ordered my first modules to get more functionality out of the Brute. I started with additional modulation, noise, and utilities to mix and invert modulation sources. From there, I continued collecting modules over the years. I started the original Monotrail music channel and made weekly jams where you could see the modular grow in the background. Make sure to subscribe to that channel as well if you're interested in following my music. The channel is called just Monotrail. I plan to do a lot more studio sessions this year. While collecting modules, I kept the focus on building a portable performance case. And even though I swap out a module or two every now and then, that original design is still pretty much the same in the case I use today. Along the way though, I did step away from the idea of sequencing within a modular and bought the Arturia Beatstep Pro. It can sequence 2 monophonic voices as well as up to 8 drum voices via control voltage. I could also store, change and mute sequences on the fly, making it a perfect and affordable performance tool. I started doing live shows under the name Monotrail. I kept the focus on the modular, but along the way I experimented with some additional tools and gadgets. Here are the ones I still use today. The Korg Volca sample, a sample-based drum machine. I used it in a few performances to add percussive parts, simply because it's so portable. But to be honest, it's pretty noisy and I quickly stopped using it. Recently I got it out again and now actually really like it to stretch and crush samples and add texture and grit to drum patterns made with other devices. For example, my Roland TR8s. I bought this to be able to quickly program, jam and experiment with beats without having to use a DAW or patch up the modular. I think it really hits the sweet spot, having a mix between solid classic sounds, as well as the ability to import your own experimental samples via an SD card, and having a lot of direct control over your sounds. In all fairness, I have to use it more, but I'm confident I will. Especially in the new setup here on the rack, you will see me using this for sure. Collecting more and more modular gear, I did start to miss polyphony in sound design. But having made the decision to spend most of my money on modular gear, I couldn't justify buying a big polysynth. So instead, I made a decent deal on a second-hand Dave Smith Mofo X4. This is a 4-voice version of a 1-voice version of the Prophet 8. So basically half a Prophet. It has the same oscillators, filter, and for me very important, strong modulation section. It has 4 LFOs, 3 envelopes and 4 modulation step sequencers. I considered replacing it with a Prophet 8 and later a Prophet Rev 2 many times, but the thing is, it has this one knob that the Prophet doesn't have, a feedback control. And on poly patches, it sounds brutal. I also picked up the Yamaha CP, a digital recreation of some classic electric pianos. Nothing too special, but I do think it sounds really good, and especially the keyboard is surprisingly playable with great sensitivity. It also has decent built-in effects, making it a fun instrument on the road as well. Finally, the most recent addition is the Dreadbox Typhon. I bought this mostly because it sounds absolutely great and fits really well with my idea of jamming and writing music on the rack side of the studio, aiming for synths with patch memory and great MIDI control. But I also like to expand the tutorial channel with non-modular videos, and this seemed like a fun place to start. Some last gadgets lying around are the TC Electronic M350 used as the master reverb, the A2V16N rework fader bank for modular control, a cheap reverb and delay pedal, mostly used to spice up modular percussion during live performances, as well as the DoD Rubberneck, a really lovely, dark and flexible analog delay. Also, there's a proper disco ball, of course, although this thing dropping unexpectedly on my head is probably how I will die, as it's extremely heavy. And that's about it when it comes to sound design tools. Let's have a quick look at other audio gear I use. Like I said in the beginning, I will upload a compact video about my recording and MIDI setup in detail next week. This is just a quick overview of my other audio gear. The modular side is mixed with the APCkey 1202 VLZ4. It's used to multi-track the modular and other gear on this side of the studio, sending the main and alt outputs, as well as the 4 inserts, to the Motu Ultralight MK3, an 8-channel audio interface connected to my laptop via USB. The rack side of the studio has a new APCkey Onyx 12, which is also a multi-track interface itself, connected via USB, literally to the other side of my laptop. So I can record and mix separate sections, but if I want, I can record all tracks from both sides individually at the same time. The Motu is connected to a simple monitor controller. As for monitoring, after some others I settled on the Yamaha HS7. I added a single Aventone mix cup to it, and to be honest, that really was a great choice. It helped me to dive more into the mixing side of producing. There's still a lot of ground for me to cover on that side, but I'm enjoying it more and more. I also recently had a chance to add the Campfire Audio Andromeda in-ear monitors to my studio. They also help to make mixing decisions, especially in a small room with some acoustic problems like mine. They really sound great, and I'll be using these a lot in the future. Keep an eye out on this Tech Talk channel for tutorials and my other channel just called Monotrail for music. Also smash that like, subscribe and bell button if you want to see more modular content from me, but that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time.